Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. The more things change, the more they stay the same. On Friday evening, things stayed the exact same between Purdue and Wisconsin on the football field as the Badgers come into West Lafayette and walk away with a 38-17 decisive victory. Purdue falls to 1-3 on the season and 0-1 in Big Ten play. We're here to break it all down, to talk about why the Boilermakers fell short on Friday night, to talk about all of the systematic advantages that Wisconsin has enjoyed over Purdue for the last so many years, and to talk about what's next. Where does Purdue go from here? Certainly not the start that most Purdue fans had hoped for to the Ryan Walters era. Where does Purdue go from here? We'll talk about that today. First, real quick, if you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. Lots of stuff to talk about there. You'll want to come join the conversation. Be sure to subscribe. Going 2 episodes a week right now during football season. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the show, send it to a friend, tell a friend. Always appreciate when you guys share the show. Always looking to grow this thing, so I appreciate all of you who have listened to this through all of the ups and downs of Purdue sports. But let's go ahead and get into this one. Wisconsin 38, Purdue 17 makes it 17 in a row for Wisconsin in this series. As you know, Purdue last beat the Badgers back in 2003. And look, this one had the feel of almost all of the games in that time frame. You know, what makes this drought even crazier is that as a whole, very few of these last 17 games has Purdue been remotely competitive in. Most of these have been like this, where Wisconsin jumps in early and physically imposes their will, and Purdue's forced to try to respond when the game is not in garbage time yet, but it's out of reach. I thought this game was a lot like last year's Purdue-Wisconsin game. Wisconsin got up huge. It was, I think, 28-3 at half. It was 14-0 in like 4 minutes. Wisconsin marched down and scored. O'Connell threw a pick six. And in all reality, the game was over at that point. You're not coming back from a 2-touchdown deficit against a team that can run the ball on you as effectively as Wisconsin can against Purdue year in and year out. And in this one on Friday, this one was over shortly after it started. It was 21-3 really quick, and at that point, it was done. The game was over for all intents and purposes. The game was over. Wisconsin scored touchdowns on its first 3 drives. Purdue had 5 drives in the first half, scored a total of 3 points. That kind of tells you all you need to know. The first drives of the game really summed it up. Purdue goes 3 and out. Wisconsin walks down the field and scores easily, of course, on a Tanner Mordecai scramble, a trend that Purdue just cannot seem to buck here. It cannot stop the opposing quarterback in the run game. But as a whole, this game just wasn't particularly competitive. When you look at what's going on here, Purdue is not close at the line of scrimmage, especially for what it wants to do defensively, and I'll get into that momentarily, but Purdue's defensive line is not big enough and strong enough to compete with a team like Wisconsin. I think some of these guys Purdue added through the portal are solid. I think they're fine. I think Nichols and Langham are solid. Mbaz had some moments. But as a whole, Wisconsin's offensive line manhandled Purdue, and that told the story of the game. And on the flip side, when you look at just the line of scrimmage, until the second half, when Wisconsin just kind of went into, a shell defense to prevent Purdue from hitting big plays, Hudson Card had no time to throw. Hudson Card had no time to operate whatsoever. He was running for his life back there. And really in the first half, I thought Purdue's best offense was Hudson Card just going all scramble drill. I don't think that's what you want to be your best offense, but that's all Purdue could really do for a while because he had zero time to operate. Fixing these gaps at the line of scrimmage is not an easy fix. That's not something that you're going to fix particularly easily. I don't know that that's something you can just flip out of the portal next year and feel a lot better about suddenly, because you look at what Purdue got out of the portal this year, especially on the offensive side of the line. They're fine, some of them, but none of them are a huge difference maker. Preston Nichols has been pretty good, but as a whole, it's not like this group has really given Purdue some strong offensive line. This is what you have to do. This is a long game thing where you have to develop this in-house. On defense, I think we're entering a really interesting conversation here about schematically what Ryan Walters wants to do. And I'm not going to be the one to sit here and say that this can't work, because I think it can. I think Purdue has a long way to go, though. From a talent perspective, Purdue does not have what it needs to run this Ryan Walters defensive scheme, either up front, at linebacker, or in the back end. None of those spots are particularly well suited from a talent perspective to run the system right now. Up front, Purdue has to be able to stuff the run. Purdue has to be able to get into the backfield and hit opposing ball carriers early. And right now, Purdue doesn't have that. When you don't have that, Purdue only plays with 6 guys in the box a lot of times, sometimes a 7th with that extra safety, Sanusi Kane, coming in. But Purdue plays where that defensive line needs to be good and run stop. And Purdue doesn't have that right now. What you hope is that, some of the weaker teams in the Big Ten West can't exploit it as much. If they can't, I don't love Purdue's secondary. It's gotten a little bit better, it seems, but I don't think Tanner Mordecai was a great quarterback, and he had the ability to make some big throws. They had a couple drops, a couple plays that could have been made, but when you look at this defense, I think Kadron Jenkins has been really good. He's been fantastic for you. Dylan Thieneman looks the part of someone who is going to leave Purdue with his name all over the record book. He's a guy who's going to be in the top 10 in interceptions. He's a guy who is going to make a boatload of tackles, break up passes. He's going to be someone who has a great career at Purdue. I like Marquise Wilson at corner. I think he's pretty good. But as a whole, this defense is not particularly good. Again, the first 3 drives of this game told the story. It was 20. They had 21 on the board like that. And in the second half, Wisconsin goes full risk averse and is just trying to run out the clock, really. I just don't know how you really evaluate this defense, because it does not have the pieces needed to run what Ryan Walters wants to run. There is a lot of help on the way in the back end, but Purdue's going to have to find a way on the defensive line to get bigger, to get those guys that Walters leaned on last year, like Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph, on the interior of the defensive line that are real game changers there. I don't know how you can really evaluate Hudson Card right now with how little time he has to work with. The offensive line is brutal. It is struggling badly to give him time to work with. I don't know. This isn't a situation that can rectify itself during the season. It is what it is. And in reality, with the possibility of injuries and stuff, it's more likely to get worse than it is to get better. There's just no time right now. In that first half, Hudson Card just didn't stand a chance. I don't know how you fix it. Purdue's thin at tackle. Musa, if he's healthy or not, I don't really know. The right side, Bo is he's fine at tackle. He's a really good guard. He's just fine at tackle. the transfer portal guys you're plugging in on the inside, okay, they're okay. But Purdue is just getting whooped on the line of scrimmage right now. And with Hudson Card, I'm also not sold on the receiver room. I don't understand, and maybe, Ryan Walters made this pretty clear. In his radio show the other night, he got asked about how Purdue doesn't rotate at receiver very much. And his answer went along the path of, even when those three guys are tired, Deion Burks, Abdur-Rahman Yassin, and TJ Sheffield, his answer went along the lines of, even when those guys are tired, they give us the best chance to win over some of the fresh guys off the bench. Either these guys are just that much better than everyone, or there's something I'm not seeing, because Deion Burks is really good. We continue to see reasons to be really high on him. He's a solid player for you. Yassin is a real nice possession receiver. Wisconsin was really physical with him, and that was an adjustment, I think, but he's a solid possession receiver for you. But TJ Sheffield's been pretty quiet this year, and we don't see any of these guys off the bench. We don't even see Mershawn Rice. We don't see Elijah Canyon. We don't see Jaden Dixon-Veal. We don't see some of the younger guys, like a Zion Steptoe. Nothing. It surprises me, but maybe it shouldn't. I don't know. I'm just trying to throw out some thoughts here because it's a limited crew. Max Clare continues to look good while Garrett Miller looks rusty. He's still working back into things, I think. This Purdue pass game, I think Card has been solid. I know he finishes with 2 picks. One of them was the Hail Mary before half, so I'm not going to look much into that. But, the second pick was not a good throw, not a good decision. I think as a whole, though, Card's been fine. He's been solid. He's not been superb. I don't know that he's been the best quarterback from the transfer portal, but he's been pretty good for you. The run game had a fine day, with the caveat that a lot of it came after this game was semi-decided. Devin Maccabee's really in the doghouse. The 3 fumbles against Syracuse certainly got him there. I get it. And it did not help him at all how that play in the fourth quarter went down. When Hudson Card gets strip sacked, the ball ends up in Maccabee's hands. Thought the play was dead, gets stripped out, Wisconsin takes over. That's a tough break. I don't attribute that all to Maccabee, but just as a whole from Purdue, not great situational awareness there. Purdue's got to be better in that spot. That's just a play that can't happen. This season as a whole for Maccabee has not been the follow-up to his breakout freshman campaign that I think we expected. 4 carries for 30 yards, 1 catch for a loss of 3. He really, for a lot of this game, Purdue was going with what felt like a true running back rotation of 3 guys. You look at this, Tyrone Tracy, 8 carries, 6 for Downing, 4 for Maccabee. Purdue is really rotating 3 guys in. I think Tyrone Tracy looks fantastic. I know I've tweeted this a couple times now, but it's a shame that he didn't play running back his whole career. It's a shame that he spent 5 years playing wide receiver because he's a good running back. He's a really good running back. He can make some guys miss. He can run between the tackles a little bit. He's really good. I'm liking what I'm seeing there. Dylan Downing is a little limited, but he broke off a nice run. I think Purdue has something with these running backs. I just don't know with the offensive line that it's something that you can ride game in and game out, and that really limits what you have at running back. A lot of conversation, Twitter, message boards about Graham Harrell and play calling for Purdue. I don't know how much to really pin on him with what the offensive line is. And I don't know that I think the offense has been horrendously bad. I think there are just limitations. Purdue's very pass heavy early in games. That's something I've noticed. Maybe that's by design. Maybe I'm not going to argue with philosophy on that if you don't feel good about being able to run the ball behind your offensive line. But again, I think we're just seeing a lack of ability to get the ball into your playmakers' hands. And that's what the air raid, you have to do. You have to get the ball into the hands of your best players over and over again and give them room to operate. I don't know that Purdue can do that right now. I'll note, too, just folks have talked about firing Graham Harrell, whatever. That's not going to happen. 3-year contract for him, all guaranteed. Purdue's not in the business of paying $1.7 million buyouts to coordinators or whatever it would be. That's not going to happen. Harrell will be here for a while. So I don't think Purdue should fire him, but he won't be moving on. Just to put that out there. Look, overall, I don't know how good Wisconsin is. I don't think they're great. I don't think this is a vintage Wisconsin team that can go 10-2. We saw them lose at Washington State, who looks pretty good. They just took down Oregon State yesterday, recording this here on Sunday morning. But they look pretty good. But I don't think this Wisconsin team is great. I really don't. Mordecai did not look all that impressive. I didn't think he was great. He was good with his legs. Purdue can't contain that to save its life. My goodness. Any quarterback that can move a little bit is going to have a big day running the ball against Purdue. 14 carries for 58 yards for Mordecai, a few sacks in there to dilute that. But throwing the ball, he's okay. He's just okay. He might be good enough to win what is a terrible Big Ten West. This division is terrible. Iowa does Iowa things in the whiteout at Penn State. They don't score. Illinois, not great. Hung around with Florida Atlantic most of the game. I'm not impressed there particularly. Minnesota blows one against Northwestern, who is just a complete dumpster fire. Nebraska doesn't pull away from Louisiana Tech. It's not a good division, guys. It's very possible that Wisconsin wins this thing, but it thoroughly dominated Purdue, and it wasn't clean. Wisconsin had a ton of procedural penalties. Wisconsin gave Purdue some chances. Wisconsin's up late in the game after Card throws a pick, and they're putting the ball in the air. Botros Alessandro picks one off. It was not a particularly great game for Wisconsin, but it was over before it started. I know a lot of talk about Fickle going for 2 late in the game. It did put the point total over. That was interesting. Not throwing out any accusations here, but for those of us who dabble, it was quite interesting. It was a weird ending, though, because then you have Ryan Walters calling timeout before a 3rd and really long with like a minute to go, and then Luke Fickle turns around and calls timeout. It was weird. It felt like there was beef there that probably isn't there, but it was just a weird ending. A weird ending to what was a very forgettable night for Purdue. Purdue's put itself in a position where next week is legitimately a must-win. And that's not something fun to say about a game in September. But Purdue sits at 1-3 right now, and equally as importantly, in terms of a big picture thing, Purdue sits at 0-3 at home. And I talked about this a little bit last week when Purdue went to 0-2 at home. It is not good to lose games at home when you're trying to make an impression on a fan base. It's just not great business to start setting that precedent and to start getting fans used to losing again. The comparisons are out of whack here. This is not remotely as bad as the Darrell Hazel years, but for a year one, this is not comparable to what Jeff Brom did in his first year. It's not comparable to what Joe Tiller did in his first year. Danny Hope is probably the best comparison, but Purdue started 1-5 that year before it ultimately did beat Ohio State, clawed back to 5-7. Different rosters, different situation, but it's a game you have to win. Illinois is not tremendously good. It's struggled so far this year. Its offense is not super dynamic, as it hasn't been really under Bielema, but it's not as good as it was last year. The defense is not at the same level. It lost a lot of talent from that defense last year. There's a segment of the fan base that Ryan Walters is losing at this point. The frustration is clear. Probably what you consider the vocal minority is out and about. Look, you decide how much leeway you want to give him. I'm not here to tell you how to prioritize, how you feel about this guy, how much time to give him. That's up to you. I don't think it's worth throwing the towel in on yet, but look, year one is hard to make long-term opinions on, but Purdue does not seem to be making tremendous week-to-week improvements. That's a little concerning. I'll give you that. If there's anything that's concerning, I think it's that from what we've seen, there is not some great improvement. We're not seeing new guys come in and play a whole lot. We're not seeing changes in, really approach. It's interesting. I don't think it's the end of the world, because if you're married to these schemes in the long term, you don't punt on them after 4 games. If you have that conviction that this is what's going to work, then you don't punt on it. You don't. You limp through a year one with the thought that it's going to get better in the future. That's not necessarily the most fun thing for fans to hear, and it's a risk, but if you're convinced that that's the way to bring Purdue to the top in the long term, that's what you do. I think a bowl game is probably out of the picture at this point. Purdue would have to sweep its remaining winnable games. I view Ohio State, Michigan, and at Iowa as unwinnable. So you would have to sweep the remaining winnable games. I don't think you can sweep them. You get Illinois at home, you get Minnesota at home, you get Indiana at home. Those are games you need to win. Those are your peer programs that you need to beat. Obviously, you need to beat Indiana. It's your in-state rival. They are not particularly great. I thought they looked a little better after, hanging there with Louisville, and then they go to 4 overtimes with Akron last night. They're not great. Minnesota, not great. How do you give up 37 to that Northwestern team? Bad. You just got to stick through this. You got to try to beat some of these teams, and once the season ends and you hopefully sign a pretty solid high school recruiting class, you start attacking the portal like hell to get to a point where you can feel a little better about what you want to run on defense next year and try to find some playmakers to plug into that offense. I had a number of questions on Twitter here that I wanted to get to. I appreciate you guys sending those in. Reminder, you can always send questions in 2 ways. One of them on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. The other, you can email me, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Send in questions. I'll answer them on the show. First one, thoughts on Purdue not getting many guys on the field. Mackie Maniacs says that increases the odds that Purdue has guys transferring after the season or giving up on the season, in October and early November. I think that's a pretty easy correlation to make. I agree there. You aren't exactly keeping guys engaged when you're only playing so many guys. It's a tight rotation. Now, again, I go back to what Ryan Walters said on the radio show because that was really interesting to me. And sometimes coaches just have to have something to say, but it does not reflect well on the depth of this team. If that's the case, if that's the case across the board, where the starters are just that much better than the reserves, then to be honest, I guess I don't worry about transfers that much, because if they can't make an impact right now, are they going to get there? Is player development going to get that much better? Maybe, but I think the giving up on the season is something you do worry about, though, and you don't want coaches to give up on a staff. I don't think that's what's going to happen in year one. Ryan Walters seems to have a good connection with these guys, but yeah, when you're losing and you're not playing a bunch of guys, you're not getting a bunch of freshmen and sophomores their time to kind of develop, then yeah, I mean, it's something where there are guys who will transfer. I mean, that's part of college football now. Purdue will have guys transfer after this year. I'm not going to handicap a number or something, but there will be plenty who transfer. You worry about giving up, though, especially when, right now it's entirely possible that your 3 most winnable games on the rest of the schedule are your last 3. You got to stay engaged. Mackie Maniacs also asked, what do you make of this team being extremely undisciplined and turnover prone? With some of the penalties, and I pulled the ones from this game. I didn't go back to Syracuse, but you had a few pass interferences and a few roughing the passers that were a little questionable in that game. But in this game against Wisconsin, I don't know that I view it as much of Purdue is undisciplined as it is, I think some guys are just getting sped up and making mistakes. You had 2 holdings, you had 2 false starts. The holdings, Purdue was getting manhandled. The false starts, Purdue was probably a little jumpy before it was about to get manhandled. Okay? There was a late hit out of bounds on a kickoff that I didn't have a good view of it. That was kind of coming towards the west side of the field where I'm at, looking down on it. Didn't have a great view. Can't have that. Markevius Brown got hit with a face mask. Okay. I mean, I don't know. Tough one to take, but and then Jaden Dixon-Veal gets flagged right after the replay review that Maccabee fumbled it on that play and that it was Wisconsin ball. The official hadn't made that announcement for more than a second and a half before the side judge threw a flag and Dixon-Veal's being held back. Yeah, I mean, that's lack of discipline. That's frustration boiling over. I think with the turnovers, the fumbles from last week are more concerning than interceptions. Interceptions are going to happen, especially when you're down in games and you have to try to make plays. That's part of it. Hudson Card threw that interception in the second half. It was a bad one, but he's trying to make plays. He's trying to get Purdue back in this thing. You can live with that. The fumbles are a little frustrating. I agree with that. I think the fumbles are, they are what they are, right? You look at those ones from Syracuse, the one on the mesh handoff in the red zone, that one you can't have. The one where Card got absolutely lit up in the backfield on was kind of a strip sack where he just got pummeled. Okay, I mean, that's football. 4th and 1, he's trying to make a play. The Maccabee ones are concerning. I think the turnover prone, the fumbles are what I'm concerned about. Had one here. I felt like the third quarter was really good football for Purdue. Only really seen negativity online. Yeah, I mean, Purdue did play well in the third quarter. I'll give you that. Now, my pushback would be that the game was already over, that Wisconsin was not playing the same way on defense. Wisconsin was much more content to let Purdue have underneath yards and limit big plays. Wisconsin knew that thing was over unless it completely fell apart. And what does falling apart look like? It looks like allowing Purdue to have a 2-play, 75-yard scoring drive where, it hits a 60-yard touchdown catch, or it rips off a 40-yard run. That's how the game gets away from you. So Wisconsin wasn't exactly, playing the same way on defense. Now, Purdue took advantage of it. You give credit where credit was due. Purdue was a whole lot better in the second half moving the football. Purdue scored 3 points on its 5 drives in the first half. It comes out, scores a pair of touchdowns. Then, things went downhill. Purdue didn't score from there, but it got into Wisconsin territory a couple times. It is what it is. I think with the negativity online, look, folks had expectations for this season. Now, whether that was fair or not, I think through 4 games we can really have conversations about what Purdue's preseason expectations were within the fan base and what they should have been, because I think there's a pretty big gap there. I had this team going 5-7. The receipts are there. You can go back to the Fresno State preview episode. I had this team going 5-7. I'll be honest, I thought Purdue would look a little better than it has at this point, but look, it's part of it. There were a ton of questions about this team coming into the season, and we addressed them on this show. Every problem that Purdue has had this year is something that we addressed on the show outside of Devin Maccabee's struggles. I didn't see that coming. But every question about this team that you could have had, look, it's been legit. It has been. I think it's disappointing. There was real buzz coming into this. I look at the attendance numbers for the first 3 games have been solid. 54,000 for Fresno, a 61,000 sellout for Syracuse, and 55,000 on a Friday night. That's pretty good. There was good enthusiasm. Now, as I said, you're in a must-win spot, or else this season's getting away from you pretty good. If you lose this one against Illinois, and we'll talk about this more in the midweek, you're staring 1-6 going into the bye. You're kind of staring that down with Iowa and Ohio State up next. So this is one you really need. This is one you really, really need. So I'm scrolling through Twitter here, seeing if I missed anything. Good one from Wesley here, longtime listener. We'll close on this. Purdue has to find something to hang its hat on and establish an identity. What does Purdue's identity need to be? Look, with a defensive head coach, it's the identity they've wanted is that airstrike, air raid thing where you're making big plays on both sides of the ball, but Purdue isn't doing that right now. It's a combination of things. It's not like it's a single problem, but maybe Purdue just doesn't have the players to lean into that right now. I think that's kind of the identity that Purdue's wanting to go with. For right now, I don't know. I don't know. That's a good question, because I think what Purdue wants it to be in the long term is something that through 4 games, it doesn't appear that it's going to be capable of really doing this year. Purdue's hit some explosive plays on offense, but let's face it, the biggest one was on the first drive of the season. Hudson Card to Deion Burks for the touchdown. We've not seen a ton of it since then. Had a few big runs broken off, a couple big pass plays, but as a whole, it's not been that explosive. And on defense, the airstrike isn't exactly striking. Purdue's not making a ton of plays. You look at these 3 losses for Purdue, giving up 39, giving up 35, and giving up 38. Gave up 17 to Virginia Tech, who looks like they could be one of the worst teams in the Power 5. It's just not there yet. That doesn't mean it can't get there, but it's not there yet. So that's where I'll leave it for this week. I appreciate you all listening and hanging out with me here. We'll be back later this week, either Tuesday night or Wednesday night. I'll record the Illinois preview pod. Send any questions my way. You can tweet them to me on Twitter @BoilersBeyond. You can email me, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Send anything over my way. I look forward to being back here to break down a must-win game with you guys. It's been a while there, so until then, guys, enjoy the rest of your Sundays, enjoy your week, and take care.